All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome again to Monday. Is this week 10 or week 11? Is anyone keeping track? 10? 5 weeks left. Let me just see where we are here. My calendar. 1, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, it's the beginning of week 10. So where we are now is we're kind of coming to the end of ancient Greece. We've talked a little bit about the sort of cultural trajectory of Greece. We've talked about Athens. We've talked about Sparta. We've talked about democracy. We have talked about the Peloponnesian War. Kind of all that's left to talk about. Well, that's not true. There's tons of things to talk about, but we don't really have time. I'm just trying to think. When I was in university, I was a classics minor, and so I took a bunch of classes on ancient Rome and on ancient Greece. Probably like at least 4 of each. So clearly there's, we're not done, but we have to move on, unfortunately. Let me just say hi to Noah, who's here, good morning, and to Michelle, who's here, good morning. Almost. We've got a few more things to tie up. Philosophia is next, the love of knowledge. So on Thursday, you'll probably recall, we read this section of a textbook talking about the Peloponnesian War, right? A war between Athens and their allies and Sparta and their allies. And so, again, war in the ancient world was usually a short-term thing. People would fight it out, have a decisive battle, and then everyone would go home because a lot of people were still farmers, and if the farmers don't work their fields, everybody starves, right? So you've only got a short period of time in which you can fight a war. You end the war, and then everybody goes home and continues to work on their things. But the Peloponnesian War was one that dragged on for quite some time, right? And partly because of the strategy that they used, partly because of the fact that Athens and Sparta were not really well matched. Athens was a naval empire, Sparta was a land-based power, and they couldn't really have that decisive battle that, ended the war. I think I'll come to that at the end. Nature of war. Oh yeah. So we said that the original plan for the Athenians was to basically hide inside the city walls of Athens, supply themselves from the sea, and just kind of use their navy to run around and attack the Spartans and then run away really quickly, hoping to sort of wear them down that way. Again, it didn't really work, and the war dragged on. Athens had an outbreak of the plague show up partway through the Peloponnesian War. I think I said maybe a third of Athenian citizens died, which probably would have been awful to be locked in the city with all of these people who had the plague. Again, ultimately, the Athenians decide to sail to Sicily to help out one of their allies. That's a disaster, and nobody comes back from that. And eventually, we know that the Spartans will win this war, and so they'll get some help from the big bad Persians, who we know from the 2 earlier attempts to conquer Athens, but they'll lend their fleet to the Spartans, right? And the Spartans will use that fleet to kind of create an embargo or a quarantine, if you will, around Athens so that no food can get in. And basically the Athenians are forced to starve to death or surrender. They surrender. The Spartans burn their fleet, tear down their city walls, and that's kind of the end of Athens as a military, naval empire power sort of thing. But they do become something a little bit different in the end. They do become a city that is a little more intellectual, a little more based in academics. On Thursday, we also watched this video on Icarus and Daedalus, right? The myth of Icarus and Daedalus. And I think we said that, one of the central lessons of this myth is hubris, right? And so, don't get so full of yourself that you think you can go around and do whatever you want and be better than everyone else, right? And here, this is almost what the Athenians did exactly, right? They thought they were undefeatable. They thought they were the most powerful city in the Aegean, and they should have mastery over all the other Greek city-states. And, in metaphorical terms, they kind of flew too close to the sun, right? And in the end, they lost it all. And so I asked you to think about, we transmit these kind of cultural values and stories in myth, but it's interesting how sometimes we don't really pay attention to what those lessons are because, I don't know why. I don't know why we don't do that. Maybe we think they're overly simplistic, or maybe we just think we know better, or but clearly the Athenians don't heed the moral of this particular myth, and they suffer the consequences for that. We watched a little bit more of the Truth About Democracy, that documentary on Thursday. Can you jog my memory on this a little? What were we talking about with regard to the bronze sculptures? They're using wax.
They use non-human beings because of the pressure on sculptures.
Right. So looking at these bronze Greek sculptures, which have been celebrated for how realistic they are, this artist here, Nigel Constant, thinks, well, yeah, they're so realistic because they molded them from real people. And so he says, if you look at the feet, you can see that the feet are kind of squished as if someone was actually standing on them. And he said it's not really the kind of thing you would sculpt, but that's the kind of thing that you would, if you took a cast of someone, you would see that. You would see that the bottom of the foot was kind of flat and squished, right? Yeah. So he says, yeah, they were taking casts of these people, and then you fill the cast with wax. You stick all those wax pieces together and smooth them out and make them look like they're one piece. Then you build a cast around that, right? You build plaster around that, and then you pour molten bronze into the top. And so the wax immediately liquefies and pours out the bottom, and then you've got this beautiful bronze statue. And many, those bronze statues from ancient Greece are works of art, right? You'll find them in the Louvre and fancy museums like that around the world. What do we learn about Socrates? He's definitely a non-religious kind of guy. What else do we learn about him? Yeah, he kind of had an annoying habit, and again, we're kind of celebrating this guy as the father of philosophy, but I imagine he was a real pain in the butt to be around, I suspect, because he would try to challenge people's beliefs, right? He would try to expose that, hey, what you think you know, you don't actually know at all. You don't know anything, and he would try to expose that, and so, of course, nobody likes to be exposed as not knowing anything, and so I assume he annoyed a lot of people in ancient Athens. But he asked a lot of questions to expose people's beliefs, right? Had they actually thought critically about what they believe and what they think they know? And so this is this thing called rational inquiry, right? So how do you know what you know, and are your beliefs true? Right? Are your beliefs based on premises? And if they are those premises true? And again, Socrates was very good at exposing people and showing them that the things that they believed were really based on nothing at all, right? They weren't based on any sort of critical thought. They weren't based on any sort of logical argument. People had just absorbed their beliefs without really questioning why they believed what they did. And again, Socrates is very good at exposing those things. What kind of things did we see appear in Greek drama? Has anyone read or seen any Greek plays acted out? No? You have a phone call? Okay. Well, what were some of the ideas that showed up in Greek plays? Was a bit confusing? Yeah, it was a little. There was some kind of like literary criticism stuff happening there. Do you remember anything from that? Yeah, yeah. So the classic, I think it's a Sophocles play. Sophocles is the author. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. Might be Euripides. I think it's Sophocles, and it's a play called Oedipus Rex, and in Rex means king, and so Oedipus is the king, and Oedipus receives, I think, a prophecy from an oracle that he will kill his father and marry his mother. And to which, of course, he hears this prophecy and says, that's ridiculous. You know, I would never do such a thing. No one in their right mind would do such a thing. How awful. And so he goes about his life and continues on, but eventually he finds out that he is, toward the end of the play, that he has done just that. And I think the twist is that he was adopted. And so he takes over a rival kingdom and kills the king and marries the queen, but then only to find out that he just killed his real parents, and his adoptive parents, he thought they were his real parents or something like that. Sorry, spoiler alert. So there's this twist, and so he winds up fulfilling the exact prophecy that he was given. He did in fact murder his father, and he did in fact marry his mother, which causes him to gouge his eyes out in anguish and then live the rest of his days blind. But in the documentary, and Mulder's kind of like, ugh, right? But a lot of these Greek plays involve just that. They involve these like tragic situations, right? And tragic by which, the main character is like doomed to a certain fate, and it doesn't matter what the character does. His destiny is his destiny, right? And so for Oedipus, his destiny is to kill his father and marry his mother. And even though he doesn't believe it, and he doesn't want to do it, and he doesn't really try to do it, he winds up doing it anyway, right? And so the tragedy is like, he cannot escape his own destiny, even if that destiny is awful. And so that's kind of one of them. But lots of these plays have these really like, well, for lack of a better word, they're very dramatic, right? There's these big events. Sometimes the gods play a role. People are being cursed and murdered, and there's people having sex with their mother, and like all kinds of, wild, crazy things. And it's interesting to think about, again, back to story. We talked about this with Gilgamesh, right? Is like, what does the story of Gilgamesh teach us about, the ancient Mesopotamian cultures? And here, what do these tragic plays, these plays where, people cannot escape their destiny, or no matter what people try to do, they're doomed anyway. And it's like, what does that tell us about the Greeks? Well, what about that worldview? Yeah, I guess it's, in a way, it's almost like the Tao, right? There is an order to the universe, and things kind of happen a certain way, and you have to align yourself with that. Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you this? Does anyone here believe in fate or destiny? Do you think you have a destiny?
I do believe, but I know it's not honest. Like God knows what's gonna happen,
Right.
but at the same time, it's our decision.
Okay.
Let's say, for example, if I see someone in front of me, I get to choose to kill him or not.
Right.
If I kill him, there's a new destiny for me. If I don't, I'm gonna continue my destiny.
Okay. So you are entirely in control of that then.
Yes, but
Okay.
of course, I believe that God knows what's gonna happen.
Sure.
But I can control it myself. I can choose to do it or not to do it.
But he sort of knows what you're going to choose ahead of time.
He knows.
Okay.
At the same time, he gave us a brain to think about. So it's like kind of confusing, but like I can't control my destiny.
It is confusing. Yeah.
So, if God knows what you're gonna do, then it means you're not deciding what you're going to do, it's Him deciding. So I don't think you're in control of your own destiny, it's Him. You
Then
just
why should I
predict in your brain.
get to jail if I do something? God wants me to do.
Well, yeah. This is good, but this is good. This is opening up. This is philosophy, right? This is, how do we know what we know? Are our lives predestined in some way? Is the story of Nicholas or Ivan or Mulder or Basil or Amanpreet, are those stories already written and it's just that you don't actually know what the story is yet? Or is there no story? Are you writing it as you go? Is there some place that you will wind up
The
regardless?
story for now is written. But what I do in my life, I change the story. And it's not written.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it. Yeah, it sounds like it's not. The way you describe it is that your choices are what write the story, right?
Of course, God knows what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, He won't tell me what answer is gonna be like.
Yeah.
Or you're gonna be cool.
Yeah. You don't know the story.
He gave me a brain to think
Yep.
and to work hard on my life.
Yeah.
Although He knows what's gonna happen, but He gave me a brain to think.
Which is interesting because that's a little bit contrast to, I think, the Greek conception. The Greek conception is that it doesn't matter what you choose because your destiny is X, right? Whatever your destiny is, you will end up there. It almost doesn't matter what you do. And for Oedipus here, that's exactly what happens to him. He knows what his destiny is. He's like, no, I'll never do that. That's ridiculous. And it happens anyway, right? That's the tragedy part. That's the part that's like, oh, because it doesn't, in Greek plays anyway, it doesn't matter what you do. You are doomed to that fate.
So I usually hear people, but I don't believe it, that your destiny is based on what you did, before life. And then if your story is incomplete, something it brings you to this new life, and then it ends up.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you hear about in different traditions or schools of thought. Well, it's almost like a lesson-based thing, right? Like you have certain things that you need to learn, and if you don't learn them in a previous life, you will have to learn them here, right? Or you will have to achieve those virtues, or
So it's true.
I don't know. I don't know. What do you think, Mulder?
It is harder to be funny, in the sense that every decision we make is based on our experience. So because we have that experience, we can kind of predict what our next decision is going to be.
Probably, but people are sometimes surprising, right? And again, you maybe have a better feeling for who you are and what you might and might not do. But
Because life taught us.
what's that?
Like when I was a kid, when I moved away until now, life is teaching you lots of things. So when you reach a certain point, even if you never faced it, because like you faced similar things before, you're gonna think wisely to do it or not to do it. That's it.
So, well, hopefully.
And the reason, like, like us, I just want like the reason why we're in the earth now is for our forefather Adam and his wife. They ate from an apple that God told them not to eat from. That's what the blood is.
Yeah.
So the devil came to the heaven as a snake and played with his mind to eat the apple. So since he ate it, the punishment for him is to go to the earth and start from the beginning of time.
Mhm.
That's why we're all born here. That's how it is.
Yeah, and so, well, and that's interesting too, because there's, it's one of those things that, religion can often step in and answer the question. Because again, none of us really know, right? And you were just asking me, like, what's the truth of this? And I don't know what the truth of this is, right? People have different ideas about how these things work, right? Do we have free will or not, right? If God created me, and God created me a certain way, does he have a plan for me, right? Often they say, yes, God has a plan for everyone. But then there's the question of, well, if he has a plan for me, are all my choices already made? Do I have any, am I in the driver's seat of this car, or am I in the passenger seat and I'm just going wherever God has predetermined that I go, right? And it's confusing.
So since they removed the question from the Bible, I read somewhere that Eve wasn't the first woman to be created. It was some other lady, and she got in love with Satan, so God created Eve. Is it true?
Oh, that I don't know about. I do know that, and I can't speak for Quran here, but the Bible that Christians use has been kind of edited, right? And so I think it's the Council of Nicaea in like 1453 or something like that, where a bunch of church elders get together and they choose what books will go into the Bible. Has anyone heard of this? No?
It was being changed.
What's that?
The Bible was being changed.
Yeah,
once.
yeah. So there was a bunch of books that were under consideration, and some of them got chosen to be part of the official Bible, and then some of them were put aside. And I know that in some of the ones that were put aside, yeah, the details were different. I think there's one book that mentions that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were actually married, that they were husband and wife. But the books that are currently in the Bible don't mention that. And so for whatever reason, that book was left out. And so there might be an earlier book that describes a different version of the story, but I don't know. I don't know it. But I think it's probably possible, because there are books that weren't included in the Bible that have different details and different well, in a way they're kind of like myth, right? In that there's different versions of some of these stories that exist, and so sometimes it's difficult to figure out, okay, this is the official version, right? But I think that's what they did and I think it's Council of Nicaea. I think it's 1453. Don't quote me on that, but they sort of sorted out at that point and create pretty much what the books of the modern Bible are. Okay, well let's jump into this then. Because this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about philosophia, which is again a Greek word for the love of wisdom. And philosophers in ancient Greece are asking questions about kind of the fundamental nature of existence, right? And again, these are traditionally questions that religion would answer, right? So when we talked about the 5 characteristics of religion, one of them was it gives people answers to questions that are not, they're not easily answerable, right? What happens when we die? It's not an easy question to answer. And so philosophy tries to answer these questions as well, but using rational thought, using critical thinking, right? So Greek philosophers and even modern philosophers, they're tackling questions like this. Is it possible to know anything and to prove it? What is most real? Is there a best way to live? Probably on a beach with a drink with a little umbrella in it, but I'm just guessing. Is it better to be just or unjust, even if you can get away with being unjust? This is what we were just talking about. Do humans... What's that? The last one? Which one? The just one? Yeah. So is it better to always try to do the right thing, or is it better to sometimes do the wrong thing, even if you can get away with it? Even if no one will find out. Do humans have free will? This is exactly what we're talking about, right? Do I actually have the ability to make any choice I want, or is it somehow controlled or predetermined, right? Again, philosophers are asking all of these questions. There's three that we'll talk about. These are the three kind of big names in ancient Greek philosophy. Socrates, who we've heard about. Plato, who we have not heard about, I don't think. Plato is actually a student of Socrates. And Aristotle, who is a student of Plato. So there's a bit of a teacher-student relationship all the way through here. Socrates, again, we kind of know him as the father of Western philosophy, but he's kind of a little bit mysterious in that none of his stuff, he didn't actually write anything down. He just kind of wandered through the city harassing people, as near as we can tell. But his student, Plato, and Xenophon and Plato, they actually wrote down what he said and what he did. And so we kind of know him, not through his own writing, but through the writings of Plato and Xenophon. And so here's some of the things that Socrates is quoted as having said. The only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing. Ooh, deep. Employ your time improving yourself by other men's writings, so that you shall gain easily what others have labored hard for. What does he mean by that one? Yeah, it's much easier to learn things that other people have already learned, right? So it's much easier to study things that other people that have already figured out, because figuring out things on your own is difficult. So learn from other people, right? Read what other people have written. It's easier that way. Are you laughing at the last one? Yeah. By all means, get married. If you get a good wife, you'll become happy. If you get a bad one, you'll become a philosopher. I'm going to leave that one alone. But, these are kind of some slightly humorous quotes, I guess, attributed to Socrates. But again, he's an interesting thinker. The other thing that's kind of interesting about Socrates is how he dies. Do you remember that? They mentioned that in the video on Thursday. Do you remember how he died? He was forced to drink poison. Do you remember why? He did. He was charged with. He was kind of charged with that, but that wasn't really what he was doing. Wasn't really. He was questioning the power of the gods, but he was also questioning the power of the Athenians. And so what was happening is that, when the Athenians went to war with Spartans, sorry, I'm just getting something ready here. When the Athenians were voting to go to war with the Spartans and continue the war, Socrates was one of the people saying, you know what? I don't think this is a very good idea, right? What are your reasons for wanting to go to war with Sparta? And so he was kind of a very vocal opponent of going to war. And so eventually, when the Athenians lost, you remember when they won against the Persians, they were like, what makes us different, right? Why did we win? It must be us, it must be our democracy, right? And so when they lose, when they are beaten by the Spartans, the Athenians then ask themselves, well, how is it that we lost if our democracy is so special? Something must have gone wrong, right? Something must have corrupted us. And so people start to look at Socrates as the corrupting influence. And of course, he's not, right? He's just trying to get people to question their beliefs and why they're deciding what they're deciding. But again, he's going to be kind of scapegoated. He's going to be the one who's singled out to be punished. And so, yeah, they convict him. They sentence him to death. There's a funny story, I think, about Socrates where, and hopefully I'm getting the story right, but what you do in the Athenian law courts is you present your case, right? So Socrates is accused of something about false gods and about corrupting youth is what his charge is. And so he gets to speak to the jury and say why he's guilty or why he's not guilty. And then the jury goes away. They decide whether he's guilty or not guilty. And if he's guilty, he gets to make another speech before they sentence him. Sort of like, oh, please don't kill me now that you've found me guilty. Please show me mercy. That's the idea. So Socrates went ahead and insulted everybody at the first speech. So he told everyone why, in fact, they should be giving him glory for, questioning their beliefs in this way. And then he went on to, so they found him guilty. And then in his second speech, he insulted them even more to the point that more people voted to execute him than had voted to convict him in the first place. So some people who thought he was innocent at first changed their mind and said, okay, let's kill this guy. So he must have really offended them the second time. Either way, he's an important figure. And so this may not surprise you, but based on the fact that he was convicted and executed by the Athenian democracy, he actually didn't like democracy very much. And he had some very vocal ideas about it. And so I want to show you a quick video talking about Socrates, why he disapproves of democracy, what he suggests as a remedy for these problems, okay? They'll talk about demagogues, and so I'll ask you what a demagogue is. And what do you think about democracy in the state of democracy in the modern world? That's what I would like to know about. But first we'll hear what Socrates has to say. So online people, of course, the link is in Microsoft Teams, and so you can see it there. Go watch the video, and then we'll answer these questions as best we can when we come back, okay? It's just a few minutes long, so see you in just a couple minutes. Okay, so yeah, Socrates is not a fan of the democracy in which he lives, and why doesn't he like it? Because everyone can vote, and what's the problem with that? Right. So he says that voting is a skill, right? You need to carefully weigh the alternatives. You need to know what you're voting for and what you're voting against. Things are complicated, right? Especially in ancient Athens where they vote on everything, right? Here in Canada, we don't vote on everything. We just vote for a person, and then the person votes on everything for us. But in ancient Athens, the Athenians have to vote on every issue, right? And so they have to understand what the ramifications of each one. And Socrates is saying, I don't think that's happening. I don't think people understand what they're voting for or what they're voting against, right? We know what happened in 399 BC. He was executed, right? He was forced to drink hemlock, which is a poison, and apparently it's quite a painful way to die as well. It's not a, you don't sort of fall gently asleep. Apparently it's quite painful. How does he say that we can fix democracy? Socrates. Yeah, improve people's education, right? That's the only way to ensure that people are making good choices and that they're voting in a responsible manner, is to give them the skills and the education to do that, right? What's a demagogue? And does he remind you of anyone? Does the demagogue remind you of anyone? I was thinking Trump, but there's a number of leaders who fit the profile, but what's a demagogue? Yeah, in general, there's probably a more general way of saying that, but you're not wrong. You're not wrong. What's the demagogue do? It's a person like Donald Trump, but in what way are they like Donald Trump? Mm-hmm. Which is how? Erratic? No, I wouldn't say that. What are they trying to say with that comparison between the doctor and the sweet shop owner? Yeah, undereducated people might vote for the sweet shop owner. Basil, what did you say? Yes.
But due to the lack of intelligence of the people, since it's a democracy, they would vote for the Swedes to eat and have fun. But they don't know that the Swedes are going to harm them, and they need the doctors to work.
Yeah, pretty much. So the sweet shop owner is going to tell them exactly what they want to hear, right? Come into my shop. Everything tastes amazing in here. I can give you cookies and candies and cakes and all kinds of things. They're delicious and lovely, and you'll enjoy them, right? And so, we know that too much sugar isn't good for us. We know we shouldn't just eat a bunch of sugary stuff all the time. But what? Yeah, but the sweet shop owner will not tell us that, right? They'll tell us exactly what we want to hear, and they'll give us easy solutions, right? They'll give us easy solutions to problems, right? Make America great again, whatever that means, right? So demagogues like to play into what the people want. They tell the people what they think the people want to hear. They offer a bunch of easy solutions. They don't say that anything will be painful or troublesome or anything. Everything's going to be great now. You guys are all right. You know, this is easy. We'll just do this, right? And so the demagogue doesn't lead responsibly. He just maintains his own power by telling people what they really want to hear, right? And again, demagogues are dangerous because they don't have the good of the people at heart, right? They have their own interests at heart, and they tell people whatever they need to in order to maintain their power. What are your thoughts about democracy? Oh, what?
What was it?
Demagogue is someone who you could probably say populist as well. So someone who basically tells the people what they want to hear in order to gain or maintain power, I think is how I would say it. I'm actually going to check and see. I wonder what. What does the internet say it is?
Isn't that just every politician?
Everyone?
Every politician?
No. So if you're being like a little jaded, maybe. I just looked it up here. It says a political leader who seeks support by appealing to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people rather than using rational argument. Yeah. But what do you think about the state of democracy in the modern world? Is it doomed? Is it on the decline? Is it the lesser of all evils? In what ways is it better than communism? Well, no, but that was the point that I think has come up a couple times here, is that the Athenians were a democracy, but they did some awful things, right? Even in the little TED video there, the TED Ed video, we saw that the people of Mytilene revolted against Athenian rule, and the Athenians voted to kill all of the male citizens and enslave their women and children. That doesn't sound great to me. It's not a concentration camp, but it's pretty. It doesn't what? Well, I don't know. Do you think that that's reasonable to say that a democracy in itself is not a good thing? Think to Confucius, right? What did Confucius say? He said, everything you do with humanity, right? With Ren. And if you don't do things with humanity, then it's not the same, right? Justice without wisdom is not justice. Sorry, justice without humanity is not justice, it's just cruel punishment, right? Wisdom without humanity is not wisdom, it's just being smart, right? And so, what is democracy? If democracy has no humanity, then it's not that special of a thing either, right? It's just a bunch of people voting. But if everyone has bad morals or bad interests, or if they're not educated enough to know, to know the right choice to make, or a good choice to make, then, what good is democracy without humanity? Right? I almost think that sort of theme has been coming up in a couple places, in the TED Ed video, in the democracy video with Bettany Hughes or whatever her name was. Yeah, like, just because people can vote on things doesn't mean that they're going to always make the right choice. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily it doesn't necessarily they're going to do good things, right? What else should we say about that? Anything? Is democracy over?
In Canada is probably quite a lot compared to the US.
It's true. What do you what do you think is happening in the U.S.? Like, what's your read of that?
Rednecks, racist, people voting for racist leaders.
Redneck racist people voting for racist leaders. Okay. What do you think Socrates would say?
Their education is not very good, right? Because student debt is a very big problem.
As far as I'm aware, their education system is not as good as it is in Canada. Not that ours is. Ours could certainly be better as well, but I think we have the better education system. Unless you have money, of course. If you have money in the U.S., then you can go to fancy private schools and Ivy League universities and the whole thing. Okay, let's take a break. We've been working at this for an hour. Let's take a break, come back, and we'll talk about Plato.
Sure.
Yes. All right, we are back. So Socrates is kind of the father of, I guess, Western rational thought and of Greek philosophy, and of course he inspires others to kind of follow in his footsteps. And one of the people who follow in his footsteps are this dude here, Plato. He's the reason we kind of know about Socrates in the first place, because while Socrates was annoying people in Athens, Plato was following him around, keeping notes, luckily for us. And so we know about Plato's writings, but also about Socrates and what Socrates was saying based on what Plato wrote. Interestingly, Plato's also the founder of the academy in Athens. And so this is kind of a school of higher learning. This is kind of one of the first universities in the world, if you will, founded in Athens 2,500 years ago. And so he is a very important figure in terms of Western style, rational, philosophical thought. And again, we know a lot because his writings have survived. And so we think we have everything that Plato wrote, shockingly. And so we saw one of his books there, The Republic, that was mentioned in the video. But he's got a series of books that he's written. And again, unbelievably, we have all of them. Here's some Plato quotes for you, if you so desire. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. It's not bad. I think that's fairly perceptive. Wise men talk because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something. I like it. Apply yourself both now and in the next life. Without effort, you cannot be prosperous. Though the land be good, you cannot have an abundant crop without cultivation. Right? What does that last one mean? I'm just in regular, non-Plato speak. Invest in the future? In what way? And work hard, right? Because you can have what do you think he means? Though the land be good, you cannot have an abundant crop. What does he mean?
If you don't have work now, you're gonna get something nice and satisfying in the future.
Right. So things that you want to achieve will require hard work for the future. Yeah. Yeah, your talent, whatever sort of talents or skills you might have, without hard work and training, they will not be realized, right? You cannot simply rely on your talent or your brains or whatever your thing is. You can't rely on it to bring you what you want in the future if you don't actually work hard, right? I have a quick video for you on Plato, just with 3 short questions. And one of these questions is that he'll ask, what is eudaimonia? Okay, so he's created this term eudaimonia. I would like to know what it means. He'll say that there's 4 big ideas. I would like to know what those 4 ideas are. And which one of these 4 ideas do you think is most important for us in the world we live in? Because of course, the world Plato lived in was quite a bit different from our existence. So which one of these ideas do you think is most useful to our lives? Okay. So online people, again, the video link is in Microsoft Teams, so we'll let you go watch it and then we'll come back and talk about it, okay? Okay, so okay, let's frame this here. So the question, so we were talking about eudaimonia, fulfillment, and what fulfillment is, and how long does it take to become fulfilled? How do you know when you are fulfilled? How long does that take? Can you imagine what it's like in your life when you are fulfilled? I think that's probably it's a part of it, right? That's his first one. The first one of his four big ideas is think more carefully, right? He says we're constantly being dragged around by our emotions, but let's take some time to actually think rationally about where we are and what we're doing and what we're choosing, right? That's one of those big ideas. I don't know, I really want to know how do you know when you're fulfilled? How long does that take? What does it feel like or look like? What do you need in order to be fulfilled? What's that?
Maybe when you set a goal and then you achieved it.
Okay, maybe you've set a goal and you've achieved it. A certain way of seeing the world? How do you mean? No, that's okay. So it could have to do with your outlook on the world, like what your desires are, or what sort of things you want to achieve or do, or.
It's different for every person. Like for example, for me, when I do fulfillment, I immediately think of a retired person. Just doing nothing, not really attention.
Just doing nothing.
Yeah, like someone who doesn't worry about anything too much.
It's funny, we often kind of glamorize that idea, right? The idea of the retired person doing nothing, but a lot of retired people find it very difficult to do nothing.
No idea.
Well, it's true.
You're fulfilled then.
Am I?
Next question.
It's hard, isn't it?
I would say not entirely. This is the interesting thing. The thing I was going to mention to you is that, compare this to the idea of the Buddha, right? Because we were saying, well, no, you can't be fulfilled yet. You're still young. Maybe you have things that you want to do or goals that you want to achieve. Look at someone like Elon Musk. He's achieved all kinds of things, and now he's doing something else. And once he's built his city, I'm sure he'll find something else to do with his money. And there's always another thing. But the Buddha says that fulfillment comes from non-attachment, right? As soon as you are desiring to have certain things, or you're desiring things to be a certain way, that's when you're going to suffer. But you can be fulfilled by not being attached to outcomes and not being attached to certain states of being, right? And so, I'm not trying to question what anyone said, because I think you're right, it's probably different for everyone. But it's interesting how our initial reaction was that, oh yeah, fulfillment takes a long time and you have to achieve things to become fulfilled. Whereas the Buddha says, actually, you could do it right now if you can sort of rid yourself of attachment to things that are impermanent. Then you can be enlightened, you can be fulfilled right now. But that's much easier said than done.
I mean, we have Earth and now we're going to Mars.
Uh-huh.
So
I don't want to go to Mars.
I mean, if they're gonna pay me.
It's dry, it's red, there's no air.
For a good amount of money, I'd go for a good deal, but
I'll pass. I think Earth is the better piece of real estate.
if they're gonna pay me like $5 million for one,
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll do a 1 year contract. Come back at 5 million, good money.
If you come back. It's a dangerous trip. Mars is a long way.
I think that nonsense,
When you're fulfilled, you'll know what to do.
like a certain, you achieve a certain way of thinking that allows you to know what you want to do.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's a way in which I think the Greek philosophers here and the Buddha and the Jains are very similar in that, yeah, it's the fulfillment or enlightenment or contentment or whatever you want to call it actually doesn't come from outside, right? Like these traditions are all different, but in all cases they come from inside, right? By creating some sort of internal state of, I guess, contentment, or maybe fulfillment is the word, right? Or eudaimonia or whatever. But all of those things seem to come from inside. It's not what you do outside, but it's how you feel on the inside, and the sort of state of mind you're able to come to, you know?
I mean, like when you feel like you have nothing to do, like when you feel like you did everything and there's nothing else to do, then like you're fulfilled. Because like for now, I want to go to the gym, I want to go work hard, but I'm not fulfilled yet. But when I get all of this and I have nothing to do else, like I did everything I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can be fulfilled.
True, but I almost feel like what you were telling me with Elon Musk is that he'll never be fulfilled because he'll always find something else. There'll always be the next thing, right? As soon as you get that thing that you want, there'll always be something else, right?
But people would never go to the States.
Well,
Like billionaires and billionaires.
it's interesting though, because poor people think that they must be, right? Poor people think that rich people must be fulfilled, right? They've got their 4 houses and they've got a private island and a helicopter and a yacht, and how awesome would that be, right? But
I mean, if a new Rolex came out, they're gonna go buy it.
yeah,
They're gonna keep on buying it.
there's always something else, right? There's always something else. What's his second big idea, Plato? The first one was think more carefully or think more often. What was number 2? Yeah, let your lover change you. What did you think about that one? What's that? Yes, no? Yeah? No? I don't know that it's, whether it's true or not, it's definitely not what we see in like a lot of Hollywood romances, right? It's usually like, it's really about 2 perfect people finding each other or being perfect for each other. But here he's saying, is that what he's saying? That's what you're saying? Romantic love is a mistake? He's kind of proposing something a little bit different, right? It's almost like you become like a team trying to improve each other, right? Trying to inspire each other to be better, right? And so it's kind of a different sort of relationship than you might see in sort of a classic Hollywood movie. Yeah, I don't know.
That's why I said no one is perfect, so you get to listen to them.
It's true. I'm really close, but yeah. No, nobody is. You're right. Nobody's perfect. What's the third one? Ooh, decode the message of beauty. What does that mean?
Think about what is so beautiful, so you can understand what causes you are.
Yeah, which is a really good question, right? Because when we see like art or architecture or things, like why is something beautiful, right? I think we know beauty when we see it, right? We kind of know it, but what makes something beautiful? And Plato says, well, it has messages about things that things we need to learn, right? Virtues that we should express. The beautiful things have that kind of encoded in them somehow, and if we pay careful attention, we can be inspired by these beautiful objects, right? Maybe. What's the fourth one? Reform society. And so what does he explain in that reform society section? Why is that? I feel like he's kind of biased there, but why should only philosophers get to vote and to rule? Yeah, maybe they're fulfilled, right? So he uses Sparta as an example. Sparta churns out military soldiers. That's what their city exists for. Could we create a city that churned out fulfilled people? And certainly those fulfilled people would be capable of making good governance choices, right? They would vote well. They would make good decisions. Yeah, they would do those things. Which one do you think is most important? Maybe not for us, but maybe for you. Which one do you think is the most important? The think more often, change society, let your lover change you, or decode the message of beauty? What's what? Which one? Think more? Why? Because you don't think a lot? Think more with the message of beauty. Yeah, it's very easy to kind of go along with what everyone else is wearing or thinking or saying or doing, right? And that's kind of how humans are, right? Humans like to kind of behave like other humans to get acceptance, and we've talked about that a lot in social justice in terms of socialization and social norms. Humans kind of like to feel like part of the group, and those who are part of the group are the ones who are kind of doing and saying the same things. But Plato is saying, don't just follow the crowd, because bad heroes can sort of have bad character flaws, and they sort of inspire people to act like them, right? And so it's useful to pay attention to that. Any other thoughts? Feelings, comments, questions, concerns? No? Okay. So that's all I have for you today. Come back tomorrow. We'll tie up the loose ends on Greece, and we'll move on to Rome. Yeah, okay. See you tomorrow.